And now we'll call up Councilman-elect Councilman Jose Santos and his family.
I, Jose A. Santos,
I, Jose A. Santos,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the State of Delaware
and the Constitution and the laws of the State of Delaware
and the Charter of the City of Seaford,
and the Charter of the City of Seaford,
that I will with true faith and allegiance bear to the same
that I will with true allegiance bear to the same
and defend them against all enemies whatsoever,
and defend them from all enemies whatsoever,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
the duties of the office of Councilman of the City of Seaford,
the duties of the Councilman of the City of Seaford,
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
All right, I'll have council move to your slots. See you, bro. Thank you.
Jeez, good evening. You too. Congratulations. Oh, Greg, you want? Let's, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Matt, did you want your phone?
Yes.
My wife will do it.
That's right. All right, our first responsibility is to elect a vice mayor. We do this after every election. This is just a ballot that you'll turn back in. Okay, and Dan Henderson will serve as our vice mayor again this year. Appreciate you, Dan, serving in that role. Appreciate it so much.
Thank
All
you
right.
for your confidence.
Congratulations.
And for council's benefit, to understand what vice mayor does, he fills in for the mayor when he cannot be here to run a meeting, but also shares in a lot of the responsibilities to help support, cover some of the additional meetings, and so it's great to have Dan in that role. All right, next, the appointments for liaisons for the next year will be Councilman Santos will take over administration and IT. Councilman Henderson will remain at police and fire. Councilman Holland will move to code and parks and rec. Councilman McCoy will move to electric. And Councilman King will move to wastewater and public works. Okay, so that'll start after this council meeting. You'll start meeting with those directors to bring those reports forth for the public. All right, city manager, do we have any correspondence?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, first we have follow-up on our tax appeal and their recommendations. Tracy, are you?
This is Fred Pearson. Hope everybody's having a good evening.
Hey, Fred, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Fred, we're going to start with 803 Griffin Street first.
Yes. Yeah, Eric Piner that works for me looked at this property. He said it is livable. He said it's probably more in fair condition. So we're going to lower the value down to $65,000. I think he paid $55,000 and made some improvements.
Okay, so what we would like to do is to individually do them so that doesn't get confusing.
Okay, so based on Fred's recommendations on the 803 Griffin Street, are we doing a roll call vote on each one of those? Is that how you would like to do it?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, if there's no questions or comments on the 803 Griffin Street, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to approve the recommendation from Mr. Fred Pearson from PTA/DELVAL to decrease the tax assessment for 803 Griffin Street, tax max parcel 331-5.19-185.03 to $65,000 from $85,200 as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Councilman King seconds. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote on 803 Griffin Street?
Councilman Santos,
I approve based on findings of facts.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, so it passes unanimously. Next, we have 724 Thompson Street.
Yeah, 724 Thompson Street. Eric Piner looked at this property, and this property is in barely livable condition, poor condition. We recommend we put it in poor condition, and we recommend a value of $50,000 on this property. That's land and building total.
Okay, are there any questions in reference to 724 Thompson Street? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the recommendation from Fred Pearson from PTA/Del to decrease the tax assessment for 724 Thompson Street, tax marshal parcel number 431-5.00-392.00 to $50,000 from $63,100 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Skip one.
What were the numbers you quoted there,
He did
Councilman
correct.
McCoy? He did? Okay, I'm not seeing that in mine. All right. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Did someone already? I'm sorry. All right, I lost focus there. I apologize. Okay, Ashley, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, next we have the 23395 Sussex Highway.
Yes, yes. This is okay. This 23.
It's the Dollar Tree property, Fred.
Is that what happened?
Yes. Get that one out first. I reviewed this. I've also talked with representative of the owner on this property. The Dollar Tree's there. It's only has 1 year lease left on its lease, and then they got to renew. And I did make some change. I looked at some of the surrounding properties, and we had an A grade on this property, and I reduced it down to a B. We have a total property value now. I'm recommending $1,554,400.
Okay, if there are any questions in reference to 23395 Sussex Highway? If not, I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the recommendation from Fred Pearson from PTA Del Val to decrease the tax assessment for 23395 Sussex Highway, tax map parcel number 331-500-11600 to to decrease the land value from $880,500 to $853,000, and the improvement value from $1,211,400 to $701,400, with the total assets being decreased from $2,061,100 to $1,554,400 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman King. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. And then we have the 22945 Sussex Highway. Fred?
That's the strip mall behind Dollar Tree, Fred.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I viewed this property. It sits behind the Dollar Tree. Visibility of that building is not good. They do have two tenants recently moved in. I think one's a restaurant, one may be a church. I don't think that it's probably 80% vacant at this time. I think they have made some cosmetic improvements to the building, but they're really having a problem renting this building here. And I did make quite an adjustment on it due to just visibility and sitting behind the Dollar Tree. I did make some adjustments to the land. The acreage we had on this tract was incorrect. We had about 1.3 more acres than what they had. And Tracy and I have adjusted that down to 2.37 acres. I also made an adjustment due to the visibility of that property, and part of the parking lot of the DoubleTree is on this property too. So I made some adjustments for that too. My final adjustment, land and building total, is $938,900.
Okay,
These two properties, we now have a total on these two properties of, let's see, it's about 2.5 million on it, and they purchased it for 1.7 million.
okay. If there is no questions on the property 22945 Sussex Highway, I'll accept the motion.
Mayor, Councilman Santos, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation from Mr. Fred Pearson from PTA/Delvav to decrease the tax assessment for 22945 Sussex Highway, tax map parcel 331-6.00-009.04, to decrease the land value from $1,162,300 to $573,700, and the improvement value from $1,123,300 to $365,200, with the total assessment being decreased from $2,735,600 to $938,900 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Councilman Holland, second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. My apologies, I skipped property 4.00-019-00. I'm not sure of the street address, Fred, but that's,
That's the farmland one out on Sussex Highway, the Wheatley property.
Tracy, I'm sorry, I do not see. I have those appeals.
So that
Is
was
this
number,
Mr. Wheatley's?
yeah,
Is
number
Mr.
2 on
Wheatley's
your
file?
list. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. On Mr. Wheatley's property, I did check his property. I did compare it to some neighboring properties. I think he's got approximately 120 acres, and the tract next to him is 68 acres. and he's pretty much in line. His assessment per acre is lower than the one that joins him. Also checked his zoning. He has at least 50 acres of commercial property there, so I'm not recommending any change on this parcel.
Okay, thank you, Art. If there are no questions.
Yep, I have one.
Yes, sir. Councilman King, what's your question?
Yep, Mr. Pearson, the last meeting we had, I know Mr. Wheatley had talked about the value of his property went up based on improvements, and you were going to look at that and get back to us. Can you talk to us a little bit about the improvements that were made to the property?
There was no improvements on the property. There's no improvement value added in. On the property record card, they did have a picture of a billboard sign there, but that billboard sign was not assessed. The only the value that we have on it now, the $4,608,500 is all land value. There is no building value there.
So what he saw, like Fred said, it was a picture of a billboard sign that was assessed, but he was not billed for that 40,000 improvement. It showed up on his bill as an error, but he was not actually billed for that, and we have taken it off so it won't appear anymore on his record or on his tax bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman McCoy, I'll make the motion to approve the recommendation from Mr. Fred Pearson from PTA Del Val to make no change to the current assessment for tax map parcel number 331-4.00-0119.00 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Councilman King, second. Ashley, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Fred, thank you so much for all your help. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you. Hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Mayor. Could I get a statement from the city manager as to the reduction in revenue caused by these reductions?
I actually did a spreadsheet, so.
Yeah, Tracy pulled it together, and she ran everything that you approved this evening. So in sum total, that's a reduction in tax revenue anticipated for FY '21 of $8,049.50, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that question. All right, next we have Buck Consultants looking at the general employee pension plan. Is Mrs. Merritt going to walk us through that?
How this works. All right, Jeff, are you on there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get started. I'm just making sure. All right. All right, so we have our actuaries from Buck Consultants on the line with us. And we have Jeff Walton, David Kirshner, and Bob Wright. So they're going to start with the plan valuation results for the 2019 plan year. So if you're ready to get started, Jeff?
Yes. Hi, this is Jeff Walton and David Kirshner talking about the valuation for the Palm and the Splendid. We're going to start off with the valuation results spreadsheet, the PowerPoint. Let's see if we have the that's the right one. David will be leading off with the first few slides, and I will end the presentation on the remaining slide. David? Hey, hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of, I'm trying to screen this meeting, so I'm not able to see the presentation, but I do have it on my computer, so I will go through and let you know which slides we're on. So slide 2 has the agenda, and there are about 20 slides in this presentation, but in the interest of time, we will not go through everything in great detail, but we're certainly able to answer any questions that you may have. So moving on to slide 4, this is a graphic that kind of describes the whole process. We are performing a valuation of the city's pension plan as of the beginning of the plan year, which in this case is as of July 1, 2019. And there are a series of inputs that go into the valuation. I'll start in the top left corner, the census data. That's the data for every current member, active participant, as well as those that are currently receiving pensions and former employees who are entitled to a benefit at some future point. So we collect all of the census data, and then we calculate everyone's projected benefits based on that data, which includes their years of service, their salaries, etc. Then moving on down to the bottom left, we collect the assets that exist as of the valuation date, so in this case for the year ending June 30, 2019. And you'll see there, we say that gains and losses are recognized over 5 years. That's because we do not want to fund the pension plan using market value of assets, as we all know what's going on in the markets these days, but even without the last few months, market values can fluctuate from day to day, from month to month, and we do not want to use straight market value as of the particular valuation date, in this case as of June 30, because markets could be up or down, and that would lead to volatility in the city's contribution. So we recognize gains and losses basically 20% per year, so at the end of 5 years, and you'll see some more details about that later. Then moving on, bottom right, we have the plan provisions. So this defines what each member is entitled to based on the plan's formula for the retirement benefits, service, how average compensation is calculated, etc. The plan has not been changed for several years. The last amendment was effective in 2013. And then in the top right corner, we put all of that data, and then we project every person through our valuation system using a series of assumptions, and those assumptions are related to what we anticipate future experience is likely to be, and we have assumptions regarding the expected return on the invested assets. We have assumptions regarding how future pay amounts are expected to increase because benefits are based on pay at retirement, not pay today. We also know that not everyone that's currently employed with the city will be with the city when they retire, and for those that do stick around through retirement, everyone's going to retire at different ages. So we have a series of assumptions and methods that we use to allocate the costs to everyone's career over a reasonable allocation methodology that's called our funding method. And then all of that information is used to calculate the city's contribution for the plan year ending, in this case, June 30, 2020. So that's the goal, is to calculate that city contribution. Moving on to slide 5, a couple points here. The first bullet, this is a snapshot measurement of the position of the plan at a given point in time, in this case as of 7/1/19. So we're comparing the assets in the plan with the liabilities, and then we calculate how much is needed to fund in the current year to ensure that there's enough money in the plan ultimately to pay the promised benefits. And then perhaps the most important message that we can deliver is the very last bullet, over the life of the plan, the money coming in, which comprises contributions from both the city and members, money coming in plus the investment return on the invested assets, has to be sufficient to pay the money going out, which are the benefits, as well as whatever expenses are paid from the trust. So money coming in has to equal the money going out over the long term. And the purpose of the actuarial assumptions and methods and the valuation is to determine a rational and reasonable pattern of those contributions. So you can select assumptions that can defer contributions into the future, but ultimately you're going to have to pay whatever the benefits and expenses coming out of the plan is. It's just a matter of the timing and pattern of those contributions, and that's the flexibility that we have in terms of managing those contributions as best we can using those assumptions. So with that as an overview, we'll move to slide 6. Slide 6 and 7 have the highlights. If you're going to take away just a couple things, slide 6 and 7 have the basic information. So the first thing we do is we look and see what happened during the year. I said earlier, we have a series of actual assumptions, both economic and demographic assumptions that we make regarding future events and future patterns of behavior. We know in any given year that those assumptions are not going to be correct. Just like the weather person forecasts the weather and they predict rain, it may rain, but it may not rain. And so similarly, we know in any given year, we may not earn the 7% assumed return on assets, but over the long term, that's what our best estimate is. So in any given year, we could be higher than 7% or lower than 7%. So for the year ending 6/30/19, the return on the market value of assets was 4.7% versus the 7% assumed return. And then the actuarial value, that's that smooth value that recognizes the market gains and losses ratably over 5 years. The return on the actuarial value of assets during the year ending 6/30/19 is 4.2%. So because that return on assets was less than what we assumed, the 7%, it creates an asset loss, or said differently, it means our unfunded liability is greater than we thought because our assets are less than we thought they were going to be. And that amount, those asset returns generated a loss of roughly $275,000. Then on the liability side, we look and say, okay, what happened to the people, the movement of the people? What happened to salary increases during the year versus what we expected? And in this case, our liabilities were actually $85,000 less than we thought they would be, which decreases the unfunded liability. And the main source of that liability gain was about $250,000 due to salaries increased less than expected. We assume a 4% salary increase assumption, and overall salaries increased less than 4%, which means our expected benefits are now projected to be lower than we thought they were going to be because salaries are lower than we thought they were going to be. And then we had other liability experience items, primarily the fact that we had fewer deaths than expected. Now, fewer deaths than expected is a good thing, but from the plan's perspective, that means that more people are still around in the plan than we thought we would have 1 year later based on our mortality assumption. So from that perspective, it's actually a loss to the plan when we have fewer deaths than expected. We also updated the mortality assumption as we do every year, and that actually decreased liabilities by about $36,000. So those are the main events that happened in the 12 months ending June 30, 2019. So what what impact did all of that have on the key measures for the plan? If we go to slide 7, you can see we have 3 basic measurements. The funded ratio, which compares the assets to the liabilities. And then we have the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. That's the shortfall. That's the difference between the liabilities and the assets. And then we have the actuarially determined contribution. So that's the city's contribution requirement, net of the 7%, net of the 5% employee contributions to the plan. So the first bullet, the funded ratio, on a market value of assets basis, we're slightly higher than we were in the previous year. And similarly, on an actuarial value of assets, we're slightly higher as well. The unfunded liability, the difference between the liabilities, the long-term liabilities and the existing assets, it's roughly the same. It's about a little over 4.3 million, up slightly from the previous year. And then the contribution requirement, the city's contribution requirement, that based on the funding policy that has been adopted, the contribution requirement is up slightly from 456,000 in the year ending June 30, 2018, to 463 in the year ending June 30, 2019. As a percentage of pay, you can see it's slightly lower as a percentage of pay. Are there any questions before we move on? Jeff is going to dig into some of the more detailed figures that support these summary slides that we just went through.
Do we have any of the funding history that goes back beyond? Do we, is that coming? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we do. Slide 14 has some of the funding history going back as far as 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about that slide now, or we can talk about it later. But if we look at slide 14, you can see the funded ratio back in 2013 was in the mid-50s, and now we're up to about 70%. So clearly, we're moving in the right direction in terms of increasing the funded percentage over time. That's the pattern that we want to see, is the funded status. In one particular year, it may go down, it may, or a couple of years, but generally the trend is you want to see that funded percentage increasing over time.
Right, we have some new folks at the table. I just wanted them to be able to see that. Thank you.
Jeff, you want to go through the rest of the slides?
Yes. I think what David was referring to was a different page number, because he's referring to, this is Jeff Walton. He's referring to his version of the PowerPoint, so the page numbers that he's referring to are slightly different based on the page numbers of the meeting. But we will get to that slide that you're referring to. It's a couple more pages after those bar charts that you saw. So anyway, we'll start with this slide, which gives more detailed analysis of how the funded ratios were created and derived. So since your assets are lower than your liabilities, it will create a funded ratio less than 100%. So as David pointed out, the funded ratio for the 2019 valuation was 70.4% versus 69.9% the year prior. And the city required contribution, as David pointed out, was 462, 463 rounded versus 456 rounded for the prior year. And as a percentage of payroll, that did decrease from last year to this year. So you could move on to the next slide. So this is a derivation of the market value asset return for each year. starting with last year's beginning year's assets, and then talking about the money going in versus the money going out. You got contributions going into the plan, which is the addition of not just the employer portion of the contributions, but also the employee portion of the contributions as well. And then you have benefit payments going out. And then what's remaining will be your investment return for the year. So this results in a 4.7% return on assets for 2019, 6.9% for the year prior. And the last line of the market value of assets just reduces the assets by the amount of any contribution from the employees, or that's pretty much the cumulative amount of the asset value attributed to the employees for their contribution. So we net that out to determine what the city is responsible for, and it nets to about $10 million for this year versus about 9.6 for the prior year. So we can move on to the next slide. I'll start on the bottom right where David was talking about the liabilities and the assets. So you have the accrued liability of $14.6 million as of the valuation date. And that's a snapshot date. So what that number represents is the liability at that moment in time attributed to any benefit accrued and earned through the valuation date. And then you have the assets. So what the pink part of the pie chart represents are the assets. But then if you add the yellow pie chart, that's that unfunded amount. So the sum of those two amounts will give you your accrued liability, but the yellow pie chart represents that portion of the liability that cannot be associated to the assets, meaning you got to fund for that at a later date. And then the two blue pie charts represent the present value of any future normal costs attributed to just the employees and the employers. And it looks like some of the legends might not have appeared on our version, but the two blue legends should show that they're the normal cost portions of the employee and the employer. And then if you sum that pie chart together, that'll give you a total liability of $17,335,000. Now that number, once again, will be what the ultimate cost of the plan will be at a future date, but this covers everything accrued through someone's normal retirement date. But what they accrued through the valuation date is only $14.6 million. So any portion that's not attributed to assets will have to be covered and funded in order to pay those benefits and expenses out of the plan. So that's just an overall view of your funded position at the valuation date. And we can move on to the next slide, if you will. This slide represents the 5-year period of required contributions of just not only the employee contributions, but also the employer contributions. So the three parts of the bar chart represents the unfunded accrued liability, and that's amortized over like a 30-year period, and that's about $336. The normal cost of accruals for those benefits accruing during the valuation year led to about $126,000. And then what's remaining is the employee portion of any contribution that they are responsible for. So if you sum the three components, you get about $610,000 on an employee and an employer basis, total basis, for 2019. And for the most part, the total contributions do look like they remain around $600,000 over that 5-year period. It's just the allocation of those three components shifted slightly over that 5-year period. You know, some employee contributions went from 1% to 5%, which moved a portion of that contribution to the employees. And you can see that growing over that 5-year period in that blue portion. If you don't have any questions, we can move on to the next slide. This demonstrates the same thing as a previous slide, except as a percentage of payroll. And you can see that the top bar chart is more than half of what the required contributions are for each plan year, because you have that $4 million unfunded that has to get funded. But just with funding it over a 30-year amortization period, that funded amount is smaller, but that will grow each year as new experience emerges. So the goal is to reduce the unfunded accrued liability, which will reduce that top bar chart down from 11.4%. This is what it is right now. And as I pointed out, the employee contributions now are remaining steady at that 5% level for the past few years now. So we can move on to the next slide. This puts everything together on the previous slides. Now, what you'll see on this slide is that the employer contribution requirements increased over that 5-year, well, actually since 2013, which is when the employee contributions were put into effect. And that decreased from 23% or 24% all the way down to about 15%, almost 16% for 2019. So the trend in the city contribution requirements has decreased over that 7-year period due to the portion of that being shifted to the employees. And this is the slide that you were referring to. The next slide is fine. That's fine. This is that overall chart of where your funded percentage grew from 2013 to 2015. So we started with about 55%. 2013 is as far back as this chart goes. But now we're growing to almost 70% on the market value, and we're over 70% on the actuarial value. You'll see, as David pointed out, that the actuarial value of assets are averaged over that 5-year period. So what this graph shows is on an actuarial value basis, that the actuarial value of assets has grown over that period, whereas due to losses of asset losses over that 7-year period, there could have been years that the assets may have lost more than expected, or they could have gained more than expected. So you can see the line teetering above the actuarial value of assets, but then it drops below as those assets are smooth. So the goal of the actuarial value of assets is to smooth any volatility, and that's demonstrated by this slide. And we can move on to the next.
Yeah, please, Councilman King.
Yep. One quick question. When you look at the total forecast for return on investment, it was over 7%, and you take the total value of the entire plan and actually achieving a little bit over 4%, how big of an impact does that have on the total picture for the plan? I mean, it's almost a 3% difference as far as what you forecasted versus what the market's actually trending. Does that impact the plan at all?
I couldn't really hear that well. I apologize. I'm sorry.
No. So if you take
go ahead.
No, did you need me to repeat it?
Well, this is David Kirshner. If I can just repeat what I thought I heard was, we thought we were going to earn 7%. We only earned 4%. So what does that do to our contribution requirement?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Well, if you scroll back to slide 6. It could be your slide. Slide 9, right there. So you can see the third sub-bullet there. The return on the actual assets was only 4.2. That increased the unfunded liability by $275,000. So that's the loss that was created in the current year because we did not earn the 7%. So the question is, what does that $275,000 do to our contribution requirement? The unfunded liability is being amortized just like your mortgage is being financed over 30 years. We are funding all of our unfunded liabilities over 30 years. So that $275,000, excuse me, created an additional contribution of about just under $21,000. So the contribution for the current year is about $21,000 higher because we didn't earn the 7% on our assets.
Okay, and so what happens the following year? Let's say that we miss the mark, we continue to miss the mark year after year. Is there any way you come in and reevaluate that and adjust that projection?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, every year we do evaluation every year. So next year we will collect the assets and we'll do another measurement at that point, and we'll see what happened in the year ending, in this case 6/30/20. And depending on what happened in that year, whatever unfunded liability that we have will then get funded over that 30-year period. So we don't know yet what has happened in the year ending June 30, 2020, because we haven't collected the new data, nor do we have the asset information yet. But we will remeasure just like we've measured here for the year ending 6/30/19. We will remeasure everything for the year ending 6/30/20, and we will have similar calculations. So it depends on what the asset return was for the year ending 6/30/20.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so this is just your participant profile over the 5-year period, and overall you have a pretty steady population. Your actives are shown on the top bar, and any movement is plus or minus 1 or 2 active participants year over year. Your terminated vested are just fluctuating around 13, 15 to 17 or 19. But overall, everything seems to just imply that the movement is pretty stable with maybe a 1 or 2 in either direction. And you only have a two participant head count from 2015 to 2019. And it actually stayed constant from last year's 2018 valuation to 2019 current valuation. It stayed at 114 participants, which are what drives our liabilities are those three components of your participant profile. So we could move on to the next slide. This is the plan provisions that David pointed out in the beginning of the presentation. So we look at average monthly compensation, and that's average over the 3-year period. We define what the accrued benefit formula is, and that's 50% of that average monthly compensation. And then that's split between service under 25 years of service and over 25 years of service. And as I pointed out previously, currently, all employees are contributing 5% of their base earnings to the pension plan. And we define normal retirement date as later of age 65 and the 5th year of service in the plan, or it could be at age 62 with 25 years anniversary of since date of hire, whatever the later of those two dates are. Or it would be the actually later of each one of those, but it would take, if 62 and 25 occurred before 65, it would lead to an age 62 normal retirement age. So that covers my portion of the vow result. Bob Wright will cover the next slide, which is a high-level overview of the risks of the pension plan.
Hi, thanks, Jeff. My name's Bob Wright. I am an associate of Jeff and David's. This is a busy slide here. I'll only touch on a few points quickly here. ASOP stands for Actuarial Standard of Practice. As actuaries, we feel it's important to disclose the risks to the plan. There are risks, financial risks, involved in managing a pension plan. We've listed a number of them at the bottom here. The key ones really are around the investment risk and the contribution risk. The contribution risk being the potential that the contribution actually made by the city differs from what we have recommended. And to the extent that were to happen or ever happens, the plan could, if it were less than what we recommended, it would have adverse consequences, or we would expect it to. And clearly the investment risk. And the investment risk, there are two aspects to that. One is the potential just that from year to year, the actual investment return differs from the assumed 7%. And I know we just discussed that. I know you just asked a question about how the current year's return was more like 4.5%, I think. And to the extent that differs from year to year, there are risks in terms of the impact on funded status, but also there's a long-term risk to the extent that there are more systemic or permanent long-term changes in the capital markets that could require you to revisit the 7% assumption. That could create a risk to the plan as well. So those are risks that you assume in managing the plan. And with that, I'll turn it back. I guess we're at the end. And does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions from council?
Yes.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a toss-up question to our finance director and to you, the consultants. You mentioned the risk of not meeting the contribution requirements that you recommend. Can you tell us whether we, the city, are meeting our requirements?
I can answer that. Yes, we are.
This is David Kirscher from Buck. We can confirm that all required contributions have been made. So there have not been any situations. I mean, there might have been some in the past, historical, a long time ago, but in the last several years, there have been no situations where the required contributions have not been made.
And one follow-up question, if I could. A lot of the charts went back to 2013, and around that time is when the police left that out, or got out of that?
The police was in 2008.
Okay, but
it was a separate plan. But the retired officers were added into our plan in 2008.
right, so the city had to take out a loan is there a reason why it only goes back to 2013? Is that an arbitrary number, or is that just a baseline? That's all you had room for on the page. Okay.
Pretty much.
So, because my question was, is if that was a significant event, or if we had paid off a loan or something prior to that, how did you account for the smoothing, for the 5-year smoothing at 2013, if those changes were being made?
That, I'm going to try to answer,
Yeah,
but let Jeff or someone step in, but the smoothing is something that's constantly happening from one year to the next. There's, those things are smoothed
Yes.
over those years. So every year when the valuation is done, those gains, losses, whatever, everything is smoothed over. So it's a continual process that continues to happen. And I don't know
Right.
if that's answering your question.
Well, it does, except for the going back to 2013, in 2008, you had an upheaval. And a lot of money left the plan, and so did investments, or some of that money had to go out.
That's when the market dropped in '08.
Yes.
Right.
And we kind of had a double whammy.
Yeah.
We added, the police officers went into the state plan, but the retired police officers could not. So we absorbed them into our plan with no, like you said, no additional funding.
Right, so,
So,
we saw the smoothing number for 2018, but we didn't really see the smoothing 5-year average for the other years to show that, in recent memory, I recall 2 or 3 years ago, we had an excellent year. We had like almost 10%.
Yes.
So
Right.
it goes up and down. But, I just thought it would have been helpful maybe to see some of those smoothing years further back in the history.
I have a chart that I can provide with mayor and council that it does go back to, I think, at least 2008, if not before. And it has a graph that basically goes back from there till today, or 2019.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for history, I think that would be good information for council to have. Okay, any other questions from council? I think we're good, June.
Okay. So then, new business number 3?
Yeah, so, we're going to move right on to the financial impact of the design changes.
Okay, so Buck Consultants is up again for this. This is the presentation. They took a look at, we went through the RFP process, and Buck Consultants was awarded our plan again as our actuaries. And during that RFP process, one of the things we had been tasked with was to look at plan design changes. And so this is the results, this presentation is the results of that, that item. Okay, Jeff.
Good evening again. This is Jeff Walton. If we're ready, we could walk you through this as well.
We're ready.
Okay, so move on to the next slide. The request from the city council has led us to address the following changes for any employee hired on or after January 1st, 2021. We want to measure and observe the costing impact for the three changes, which are the final average period change from 3 to 5. We want to cap all service at 30 years, currently no cap. And then we want to look at the employee contribution, increase that from 5% to 7%. And all these changes are measured individually. They're not cumulative. Each one is measured in itself and not to be added to the other changes, as we'll demonstrate on the next slide, or the several slides. But the next slide just explains what assumptions we made for any new hire on or after January 1st, 2021. We made an assumption about the mix between males and females what the age was that they were hired, and what was their salary at the hire date. And it's important to know on the fourth bullet that we are not measuring any additional gain loss that we could expect to emerge over this entire projection period. So we are expecting that the assets and the liabilities are going to gain and grow at the same rates from the previous year and not cause that unfunded accrued liability to either increase or decrease. So we're keeping that portion of the contribution steady, and we're only measuring any additional costs or decreases to the plan over that course of time. And all the other assumptions that we're using are the same as those disclosed in the January 2019 valuation report, July 1st, 19 valuation. So if we look at the first plan change, which is changing the average period from 3 to 5 years, the decrease in the employer's normal costs, which is your portion that you're contributing to the plan, it decreases rounded to be $500 in 2021, but then if you go out to 2041, it decreases about $6,000. If we were to measure the other change, that is the cap with service at 30 years, we start off at the date that the change is in effect, which is at 2021. It'll reduce your normal cost component by $4,000, but then as experience emerges and the data and the demographics, more people are hired, more people are accruing that benefit that is being put into play at January 1st, then you would expect to save about $60,000 in the year 2041. Okay? And then if you were to increase the employee contribution rate from 5% to 7%, you start off with saving about $3,000. In year 2041, you save $62,000 in your normal cost. And remember, that's just the one component of the city's contribution. You still have the unfunded liability to contribute, but this is measured in isolation of that event, and this is only meant just to show you what your normal cost allocation would be in each year. And also remember that this still assumes that no gains losses will emerge on that unfunded liability piece, and it will take several years before you'll see a significant impact on your normal costs.
And Jeff, this is David Kirshner from Buck. If I can just expand on this slide and further explain why we're seeing such a small impact in the early years, and then it takes many years to grow. And again, the reason is because all of these changes, these three changes that we're considering here, are only assumed to be prospective in nature. So they're only affecting those hired on or after January 1, 2021. So we currently have about 57 actives in the plan. So by 2021, we're assuming that we're going to have a stable active population. So we're projecting to have roughly 57 actives in 2021. But of those 57 actives, maybe only 3 or 4 or 5 of them, the new hires after 1/1/21, would have these changes apply. So that's why the impact is very small in the first few years, and it's only until the plan goes further and further along, and we have a greater portion of the planned population that has these changes applying to them, that's when we start to see more meaningful and more sizable impacts to the city's contribution. Because remember, we are not changing anything for people who are already retired, and we're not changing anything for people who were hired as of December 31, 2020 in this case. So all of the existing plan provisions would continue for those pre-1121 hires. So when you make a prospective change, it takes a while for the changes to flow through to generate. That's why you see larger impacts, much larger impacts in the later years when we have a greater number of people affected by the changes. Right.
That covers this slide. And we can move on to the next slide.
Jeff, are you still there?
I'm here. I don't know if my computer froze. I'm still stuck on the presentation slide number 29. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I've got slide. This is David Hirsch. I've got slide 30 up, so my computer's hasn't frozen. So slide 30 is basically the same as slide 9, but this expresses the savings as a percentage of pay. So that's the only difference between this slide and the previous slide. And then if we move on to, we show you the cumulative savings amounts on slide 31. So you can see after 5 years, if you increase the employee contribution rate from 5% to 7% for post-1121 hires, that will have saved the city over that 5-year period roughly $53,000. And you can see after 20 years, about $500,000. So that's just, that third change is just shifting some of the contributions from the city to the post-1121 hires. And then if we move on to the next slide, we address again HSOP 51, which are the risks to the funding of the plan that Bob talked about earlier in the valuation presentation. And essentially, if you read through this slide, what you'll see is changing the final average period for the pay, or capping the service, or increasing the employee contributions. All of those changes will shift risk away from the city, so it will reduce some of the risk. And the reason for that is because changing the final average period from 3 years to 5 years, or introducing a service cap, will actually reduce ultimate benefits that are paid from the plan for these post-1121 hires. So because the benefits will be lower, the cost or the contributions to fund those lower benefits will be lower, and that lower contributions means there's lower risk overall to the city. And then the increase in the contribution percentage from 5% to 7% for post-1121 hires is just a cost shifting. So you're shifting some of the risk from the city to the employees themselves.
Sir.
And I believe that is the end of the plan design study presentation.
We have a couple of
So I'll
questions
open it
here.
up for questions.
Yeah, one question real quick. We started talking about this a couple of years ago now, and it's great to see it come forth. If we decided to go with this proposed design change, would that be something that then would come back through City Council? Is that how that would work?
Yes, sir. Should the council want to staff to pursue any one or all three of these changes to the plan, what we would have to do would be work with Buck Consultants to get a plan amendment put together. As they stated earlier in their first presentation, the last one we did was in 2013. So we would work on that language, staff would work on that, and we would bring it back for approval by council with an implementation date based on Buck's recommendations.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Councilman Henderson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The charts you've presented are 20-year charts, but with a 30-year cap, would it be a stretch to say that after 2051 that we would start to see an even larger savings because you're at the cap for those people who started on January 1, 2021? Because I don't see, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I would guess that if you looked out at 30 years and then to 40 years, that those numbers would grow, would sort of drop off.
They'd continue to accumulate.
I mean, at a greater rate after 30 years because you'd be capped.
Yeah, because that's almost what you're looking at here, right?
Sort of, but it doesn't extend out because you got a 30-year cap, but you're only going 20 years.
Right.
Is that something that? Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. Sorry, there's a delay. So I apologize for interrupting. This is David Kirscher from Buck. Actually, if we extended this for 30 or 40 or 50 years, you would see continual growth in these savings because, again, we have more people that would be covered by the changes, but not for the reason that you described in your question. Because let me just explain how we do these calculations. We do each person one by one. So we take every single, as I say, there are 57 actives in the plan. So we take each person and we project their benefits out to when we think they're going to retire based on their age, when they were hired, and their pay. And we have a series of assumptions. So we project that person through retirement, and we then take that projected benefit and we allocate the cost of that benefit to their entire career. So we're funding it ratably over their career, so that if that was the only person in the plan, by the time they retired, we would have exactly, if everything went according to our assumptions, we would have just enough money in the plan to pay that benefit to that person and their beneficiary for as long as they and their beneficiary are alive to receive the benefit. So that's the way the calculations are done. So for each person that is affected by these changes, we are projecting them through their retirement, and we are reflecting for the change that introduces a 30-year cap. So person A might never be affected by the cap because person A might never have been. They might be hired at 45, and they're expected to retire, let's say, at 65. Well, they're only projected to get 20 years of service anyway. So whether we introduce a cap or not, their cost might, in this example, wouldn't change because they're not projected to go over 30 years of service. Person B, on the other hand, might be hired at age 20 and projected to retire at 65. So they now are projected to have 45 years of service. So if we cap them at 30, so we're seeing, we would see the same pattern of changes if we extended beyond 20 years, but only because we would have all different groups of people being affected by the cap individually, not because at 30 years we would no longer, if we went out 30 years or beyond 30 years, we would still see savings because there would still be people that are in the projection that are assumed to be affected by the service cap. Some are and some aren't. It all depends on, it's all done on an individual basis, and then we add up everyone's individual calculations to get to the plan total.
Okay, if I could follow up, these particular numbers, well, I saw earlier in your presentation where you were figuring that a person entering this calculation would be at 22 years old. So, it's probably in the actuarial formula that somebody's going to be 45 when you get hired. But the other thing that I would like to know is the present plan factored into this as those people attrit out of the plan? Are those numbers accounted for that?
I believe they are.
Yes. Yes, yes, this is David Kirshner from Buck. We are assuming a stable active population. So we are assuming as current active participants leave employment, some will die before they reach retirement age, some will retire. As those active employees are projected to exit the active population, we are assuming new hires will replace them to maintain that stable active population of 57 active employees. And our assumption as Jeff went through earlier is that all future hires are expected to be hired at 22. So my example of someone that was hired at 45 versus age 20, that was the actual data for current participants. Some are hired at different ages, but our assumption is, for purposes of the new hires that we are assuming to come into the population, they're all assumed to enter at age 22. So they would be, in that example, all of those future hires would be affected by the 30-year cap to the extent that they were projected to have more than 30 years of service without the cap.
Okay, we have one more question.
Yeah, this question would be for June and Charles. So if the city was to adopt and implement this program, do you feel that it would have any negative impact as far as staffing or hiring for the city?
I mean, Councilman King, I guess I could answer it this way. What we've heard through some of the meetings that June and I attend for HR and personnel issues, you run the risk of creating two groups of people. So you could have people working in the Public Works Department side by side on the same job that have two different benefits. So that needs to be dealt with our management team if we implement this. But that could be some issues that we need to take care of our employees with as we move forward with this. But that could occur.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Buck Consultants, I can't thank you enough for walking us through that, especially the opportunity to look at something to redesign our plan, bring it up to date, which mirrors what some other government facilities are offering around our area, and also not impact our current employees. So that's, and save our taxpayers money. So I appreciate you giving us an option to look at.
You're welcome.
June and Charles, thank you guys too for
Thank you.
taking the lead on that. Okay, next we'll have the demolition of 331 North Street.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mike to come up with me. Mike has a memo included in your package, and a couple months ago, we put together a demolition list, and Mr. Bolden, who is here, I'll introduce Mr. Bolden. He's the owner of 331 North Street, and on the demolition list was 331 North Street. Mr. Bolden asked council to consider suspending that demolition, which council did grant that. Council directed staff to put together a timeline for the property, which we communicated with Mr. Bolden. Mr. Bailey, our building official, wrote him an official letter, had several meetings with Mr. Bolden. So we did suspend it on April 14th, And we have been working with him since then, and I'll let Mike say about the evolution of how that occurred.
Yeah, so after you, council approved the stay of demolition, we sent him a letter addressing that it was approved to be suspended with some specific deadlines in order for him to continue to save the property, which was paying his back taxes, which he did take care of. Then the next one was to submit a work plan for permit issuance for review. That work plan I felt was inadequate. It didn't address all the issues in the property after being in there and seeing it. So I sent it back and gave him another 10 days to submit a new work plan, which I never got. So now we're here tonight to reevaluate the situation.
The only other comment I think we'll make is our demolition contractor is nearing completion on the second of the 3 locations. In our conversations with him, we believe he would still honor his price and that's the urgency of bringing it back. If we wait any longer, I believe the contractor will soon demobilize, and then I don't believe that he'll honor his bid moving forward. So we would have to rebid. Not impossible, not a big deal. We do this every year. But that's the reason why we needed to bring it back in such short order.
Can you remind council how long this property has been on the list?
He's going to refer to his notes.
Yes.
So there was a fire late 2014, early 2015, and that's when it was condemned. The code department then issued a demolition order in March of 2016 due to lack of action on the condemnation. So 4 or 5 years it's been on our list.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions from council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have one.
Yes, sir.
So, Mike, you alluded that a plan was presented. That
Yes.
plan wasn't acceptable. Can you can you elaborate on what was submitted and why it didn't meet your
It was
requirements?
very minimal in nature. It addressed the fire damage only. There is other damage that's occurred in those 4 to 5 years due to being vacant property. There's roof collapse, flooring's gone. So there's just additional work that needs to happen there other than repairing the fire damage.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay. Any other questions from
Yeah,
council?
got one.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mike,
Councilman
what
Holland.
was the shortcomings on far as his plan to remodel the house? I mean, what did he come short on? What did he didn't?
Well,
Right.
there's an addition in the back that has severe water damage from the
Okay.
roof leak, and that was not included at all in the plan. It wasn't even addressed.
Okay. Any other questions from city council? Yes, sir, Councilman Henderson.
Is it appropriate for Mr. Bolton to make a statement since he did
I
come?
was going to ask council questions first and then end up with him to
Okay.
make a statement. Yep.
Just state your name if you don't mind.
You hear me?
We can hear you.
I had a couple guys try to help me fix it back up, and he told me that I had an electrician down there and a guy, a plumber. Then he said that he told me today that his insurance wouldn't cover it unless y'all would approve it. And I'm back where I started from. I mean, I want to fix the house the way it's supposed to be. And I just waited so long, and I just hate to see what I got put in it just go down and get nothing out of it. Because I got people who want to help me to get it back, like it went back in code or what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And that's why I'm here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Santos, did you have a question?
If this property was to get demolished, how much would he have to pay the city for?
Is- okay.
Yeah, it's, okay. What we have the bid for, and I'll try to explain it like this. We have the bid from Structural Movers in the amount of $13,081, okay? So what would happen, we would execute that contract, we would pay for that, and then we would send Mr. Bolden a bill for that. If that bill went unpaid, we would place a lien on the property.
And that bill would be paid, does he have to pay everything up front, or is it?
We could work out a payment plan with him. We could absolutely do that. But let me say this, if bills go unpaid longer than 4 years, our practice is we take it to sheriff's sale. So that would be his kind of speed limit, where it would have to be fully paid prior to the end of that 4 years. But we encourage people to pay their bills when they're due.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilman King?
Yeah, is it okay to ask Mr. Bolton a question?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Is this your residence? Is this an income property? What are you gonna do with this property once you fix it up, sir?
I don't hear the best.
Okay. Is this your main residence? Is this an income property? When you get done fixing the home up, what are you going to do with it?
I'm planning on, I want to get everything the way it's supposed to be. Fix it back up to, well, my stepson, he wanted, and I want to let them, well, I live a couple of blocks over, but it's been sitting for a while, and I talked to, like I said a while ago, they told me that they had a meeting with Bailey, and Bailey said the guy that I had never called him, and everything just been going downhill for me. So I do want to bring it back to code. That's my plan.
And how long would it take you to do that?
How long would it take me? Well, I figure if I got a 6-month permit, I'll have it probably by Labor Day. No, I'm not going to say Labor Day. I would say by it's June now. Thanksgiving, I'll be finished.
The house will be fixed up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other, Councilman Henderson?
Mr. Bolton, do I understand you correctly that you have an insurance claim on this home?
What now?
You had mentioned that there was an insurance claim on the home.
Well, I had a contract. He said that his insurance wouldn't cover for him doing my house unless the city would approve.
I understand. Thank you.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So, any other questions?
I have just one more.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bailey, so if the city's requiring something greater than what you submitted, do you feel confident that you can submit what they're asking for? So if they're saying, hey, we need to see more of a plan or more of a vision that needs to be more detailed, can you provide that information to the city?
I'm hearing, but I'm not clear.
So in order for them to approve the permit that you're requesting, Mr. Bailey saying what you submitted was insufficient. It wasn't detailed enough. Can you submit something to meet their satisfaction?
Yes, I will. Well, because the guy, he had all my paperwork, and I thought I can be able to turn it in, and he haven't given me my paperwork for what the things I'm supposed to fix. But I'm willing to fix everything I'm supposed to
And
fix.
you paid all your back taxes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Any other questions from council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This is always tough when a property's been in this kind of condition for this many years. It's tough on the neighborhood, tough on the neighbors. And the council did a great job extending some time to Mr. Bolton to try to get this fixed. But we had a time limit that was set by this council, and now it's back in front of us to make a decision. Hard one as it is, but we do need to make a decision. So with that, I will accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to offer a secondary motion. I realize the risk of losing the contractor and losing the price. However, Mr. Bolden has come here come before us tonight with a plea to stay. He's paid his back taxes. So I'm prepared to make a motion that we grant Mr. Bolton another 30 days to present a plan.
Just to clarify your motion, after those 30 days, what would happen?
Well, it'll come back before us for either demolition to keep it on the list, or, it'll just go back on the list.
All right, so we have a motion to extend it 30 days with Mr. Bolton meeting all the requirements requested, or it would come back to council. Did I state that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. That's the motion on the
Right.
table.
Let's go.
Yes, do you have a question on the motion?
Vice Mayor Henderson. So originally he was given 10 days and then 10 additional days to resubmit. May I inquire to why 30?
It's 1 month. 1 month should be sufficient for Mr. Bolton to re-engage his contractors and, communicate with the city and get, I think the amount of time that we offered was about a month that transpired from April to now. Or was it April or was it May?
I believe it was May 14th.
Yeah,
when
May,
we brought
okay,
it.
so that was about a month. So, he's made progress. He made the city whole with his back taxes. He moved to us. That's a good faith gesture. So I just think that, if he needs some more time to engage his contractors so that they can communicate back and forth and we can get an agreement on a plan, that we ought to give Mr. Bolton the chance.
Do you understand the motion? Okay, so we have a motion on the table.
I'll
Do you have a-
second it.
You have a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are you going to
Those
do a roll call,
opposed?
sir?
Yeah, we better do a roll call. I apologize. Thank you, Councilman Henderson. We're ready, thank you.
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Mr. Bolton, can you hear me? Okay, we just need to make sure it's clear that you have 30 days. The neighborhood, your neighbors have been patient on this property, and we've given you another 30 days. We just want to make sure that's clear. It's going to come right back here. So I just want to make sure we're clear. This property's been in this condition a long time. We need to move swiftly. Okay? Thank you for coming here tonight. It's good to see you. Okay, next we have the appointment for the records authorized agents.
This is an annual appointment that the council does, and it's all the same people. Tracy Torbert, myself, Charles Anderson, Tricia Newcomer, June Merritt are the records officers and authorized agents to be sent to the Delaware Public Archives. So we would request council's consideration on approving the same authorized agents as in the past.
Okay, are there any questions in reference to these appointments? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to I'll make the motion to approve the appointment of records officers and authorized agents for FY '21 to the Delaware Public Archives as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Do we have a second?
I second that motion, Mr.
Count-
Mayor.
Councilman Holland, second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ashley?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Next, we have bids on the portable potties.
Yes. Okay, so annually, I apologize, every 3 years, we do a bid for portable toilets at various facilities throughout the city. And we received 2 bid responses on June 3rd. And the recommended low bidder is Aero Sanitation Services for year 1 in the amount of $13,800. $832.50. I'll just say we have worked with this vendor in the past. They have provided us acceptable service, and the bids were generally pretty close. So we would recommend award it to the low bidder.
Okay, if there's no questions on the bid for the portable toilets, I'll accept a motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the bid from the low bidder Aero Sanitation Service in the amount of $13,832 for year one for portable toilet services at various city locations as presented.
Okay, Councilman King has made a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Councilman Holland seconds. Can we have a roll call vote? Ashley?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Next, we have the bids for the Stein Highway Church of God paving, and Mr. Burley Mears is going to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So Representative Short gave us money to oversee the project to repave and stripe the Church of God parking lot. So we finally got around to bidding it, and we received 4 bids. Terra Firma of Delaware was the low bidder, as you see in your package. We have not worked with them before, but they are a reputable company, and I believe that they can perform the job with no issues. Cross my fingers. So Danny Short, Representative Short did give us a little more funding than what the bid came in. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend or get a quote from the contractor to do an upgrade, basically to do a thermo striping instead of the latex, which should last a lot longer.
Okay.
I estimate another $3,000 or $5,000 probably for that. So we'll still be within what was funded.
All right, are there any questions on the bid for the Church of God paving? If not, I'll accept. Yes, sir.
Just, is Terra Firma the company that's formerly Asphalt Paving in Delmar?
P&A.
P&A,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll accept the motion. Thank you, Burley.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman McCoy, I'll make the motion to approve the bid from Terra Firma of Delaware in the amount of $63,713.71 for the Stein Highway Church of God paving as with funding provided by CTF funding as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Councilman Santos, second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Next, we have the bids for the renovations to the High Street office building.
Okay, council will recall that in late 2019, we renegotiated with our tenant, George Miles and Buer at 400 High Street, a new lease for a period of time. The Director of Economic Development and myself brought that in front of council, and one of the stipulations for extension of the lease was they need more space. So they proposed that the city consider expanding their, what you have in your package is a bid recommendation that Tricia and I put together. We did receive 2 responses, one from BRS Consulting, $57,000, and one from the Whaling Company for $83,000 for the required renovations. Judy Schwartz, PE, with George Miles and Buer, who prepared the documents, did review the bids and did make a recommendation to award it to BRS Consulting. And the funding plan for this was to take these funds out of GMB rent reserves, was the proposal when we brought this through council in late 2019. So we do have sufficient funds in that reserve account to cover this. It was a little higher than our initial estimate, but we have ample funds to do that. So our recommendation is we do proceed for our tenant to do these renovations with the low bidder BRS Consulting.
Okay, are there any questions in reference to the renovation bid?
I have a question.
Sure, Councilman.
What was your initial estimate?
I believe it was $40,000 plus or minus.
Okay.
Councilman Santos, this is a building that the city owns that's right next door here. So this is renovation to our own property that we lease out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to award the bid for renovations for 400 High Street office building to Low Builder, BRS Consultant Incorporated, in the amount of $57,000, with funding provided by GMB rent reserves as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a roll call, please, Ashley?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, next we have the 2021 budget.
Yeah, before we start with the presentation, the brief presentation on the budget, I would like to thank the Director of Finance and all the directors for their hard work this year in pulling this budget together. This was an especially difficult one. I'd like to thank the council as well for them coming to these meetings. These were difficult, they were long, but I appreciate everyone's indulgence in getting it to this point. We did hold 2 budget workshops on May 19th and June 2nd, 2020. This budget that's proposed does not include an increase in water, sewer, electric, or user fees anywhere in this proposed budget. Included in the budget are new revenues from the Lowe's water tower attachment that our Director of Public Works negotiated, as well as 6 months from the Unified Sewer District operation is included in the sewer budget. This budget does include investments in city infrastructure, human resources, as well as continuing to increase our reserve account balances, which is very important. This is just a look at our total revenues. You can see there most of our revenues come from the electric department, obviously, in almost $15 million this year, and then general fund is about $6.4 million this year. Total revenue across the board here is just over $30 million, so that's up over the last few years. You can see that trend there in total revenue is good. This is our total expenditure chart, pretty typical for a municipal budget. You guys have seen this many times before. You know, our largest budget is electric, so our largest expense is purchase power. So the green there is that expenses in the electric department, followed by the blue there, which is police, which is our largest general fund budget. And you can see how the other expenses in fall in there. Just some capital requests. This is a large, has a lot of capital in this budget, which is much needed. You can see there we've laid it out from FY 2017 to FY 21. So this is, in the recent history, this is the largest capital request that we've made, and hopefully council will consider approval of. The capital numbers that have been submitted due to timing, there could be some changes in pricing, refinements, things like that, but any bids or anything like that we bring back to council for approval. Just a little bit about our reserve account status. These are some of our general fund reserves. You can see the balances there continue to grow. A lot of that, I have to credit the staff on how they treat every dollar that we get from our residents is very precious. They treat it like it's their own. A lot of this also, these are a lot of unfilled positions, a lot of projects that are not realized, or they bid them actively and get them for less than they can, so we can keep money in our reserves for times when we need them. This is a reserve transfer, so we balance our budget with these reserves, and so this year's transfer to the far right there is down almost half, about $465,000. The little blue bar to the far left, that's actually what we transfer. So we may budget $700,000 or $800,000, but then we only we only transfer that small amount. Now I will say this year we are in the last year of our budget, and due to the current crisis that we're in and us not being able to disconnect our customers because of a mandate by the governor's office, we are likely to lean on our reserves this year. We're just having a cash flow problem this year. So once that's all done, you'll see that number will it'll have some magnitude to it this year. We'll just look at debt service that's anticipated. You'll see there it'll peak in the next couple years. That's largely related to some large building expansions and renovations that we've done. In last year's budget was a renovation to the police department locker rooms and lobby. In this year's budget is an expansion at the utility building. Each project is just over $600,000, so the debt service will follow once those projects are completed. But the trend once we get past 2022 at this point is a positive trend. Charges for service, as we discussed earlier, there are no changes in the tax rate. water or sewer rate proposed, electric rate either. So, you know, what we show there in this slide is the last time we did a tax increase, which was FY14. Water and sewer were increased in FY18. So several years since we've had to do a rate increase. We just look at the water rate and we compare it to median household income. So our area's median household income is $44,886. And then you look at our combined total, which is our water and sewer rates are about $811 a year. So that's 1.81% of median household income. It's very affordable for our residents. Staffing considerations, so some total payroll numbers there. You'll see the difference between FY19 and FY21. That number has gone down. We've got less people on the payroll. We're shifting to some part-time people. And then you see older people that have retired. They're being replaced by younger people at lower pay rates. So that number is down. We have very few staffing considerations in this budget, but we will maintain the troop strength. Council increased that several months ago so we could get some new people to deal with attrition into the academy. This budget does maintain that 29 officers. And then this year we will reinstate a second lieutenant position in FY21. We have not had 2 lieutenants for, I believe it's been 3 budget years now. So if we have someone who's eligible this budget year with our promotional process, this budget includes that promotion. We will not increase the number of officers, just their rank. Economic development, this position was in the budget last year. We are looking to hire a part-time person to help the director with public information and marketing. And I'll just share a side note with council that if any time in history we've seen the value of public information by putting these videos out. It's important we communicate so people have up-to-date information. We're looking to hire a part-time person to help us with that mission and goal. So that is in this budget should council decide to approve the budget. And then the last one is the finance department. We are looking to hire a full-time employee to assist the director with accounts payable, do more help with, she needs to focus more on the higher level order things that she does with auditing and budgeting, things of that nature, financial management. So it is only budgeted for 6 months, so we would not start to advertise for this until last quarter of this year, so the November-December time frame hopes to get them in the January-February time frame to provide us some assistance. That is a high level of the budget. You have in your package the budget summary. And if there are any questions, certainly June Merritt is here along with most of the directors, so we can certainly try to answer any questions council might have.
Okay, are there any questions to our 2021 budget? If not, I will accept a motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the FY 2021 budget as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman King. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
I'm going to abstain because I was not present for the June 2nd budget meeting and involved with the discussion. So,
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Okay, it passes. Hey, before we move on, I do want to make a statement to the city manager and to the director of finance, along with all of our directors that work on these budgets. This year, it went smooth, even considering all the challenges we had, and I appreciate the work you guys put into it. I also want to thank the elected that your role in getting our budget to where it is, your direction and making some hard decisions has allowed us to see this. Your commitment to keep our taxes and our fees low, I think, benefits our community and puts us in a position to grow, especially as we look at these capital and infrastructure improvements we're doing now. So I'm hoping the economy kickstarts and we get back on track to where we were. So appreciate your hard work. Thank you. All right, next we have the smoke testing.
So I think everybody should be aware that we are currently doing some smoke testing. It started on the 8th, last Monday. So what we're doing is a company comes around. We've done this before as part of the Western Sussex project. They're trying to find where we have inflow and infiltration in our sewer system. we can eliminate that. The reason to eliminate that is to gain capacity down at our plant, and also, it costs us money to treat rainwater during storms and high groundwater times. So, just a little background. There's 8 sewer sheds. We've broken down into different sewer sheds that are smoke testing. It's approximately 139,000 linear feet of sewer main, which is a good bit. The total cost, as you see, is $57,360. The county is contributing $20,000 toward it because even though it's not in the sewer shed that they will be using to transmit their sewage to us, they see and realize that it would help for us to gain capacity anywhere we can. So they were willing to give us basically 30%, which our agreement says are $20,000. So I misspoke. We started June 3rd, not June 8th was Monday. We started last Monday, or well, it was Tuesday, Monday, the 3rd. And it'd take approximately 3 to 4 weeks to complete. Like I said, we're trying to find the I&I. Oh, sorry. We're trying to find the I&I. And the hard thing will be once we identify where the I&I is, to actually get residents, property owners, business owners, and things like that to actually correct the problems. They haven't found any big issues at the moment, just a few things here and there. I've received a few phone calls from residents that have had smoke in their house, but they've been understanding, and I've talked them through the process. So far so good.
Burley, how will those businesses or residents be notified?
So the company that we've contracted with will give us a big formal report, and it'll list everything that they found, where they found it, what the corrective action would be, and then we, the city, would have to go ahead and notify the owners.
All right, thank you. Okay, any questions in reference to the smoke testing?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have translators available in case someone doesn't speak English?
So we gave our notice in both Spanish and Creole that they are handing out. They hand out every day. We get a list of the area that they're working, and they hand out the flyer in all 3 languages. Other than that, I don't know that we could use a resource.
Yeah, we have call center employees, yeah, so we have, I believe it's one Haitian male who fluently speaks French Creole, sorry, and then I believe we have 2, possibly 3 that are fluent in Spanish at our call center. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Mears? Okay, thank you, Burley, appreciate it. All right, next we have the funding plan for the Oyster House, Phase 1.
Okay, respectfully, I'd like to request that we table this item. We do not have the information back from the Chesapeake Conservancy. We hope to have it at the next meeting, so if council would assist.
Do we need a motion to table?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
You asked me for a motion, sir?
I am, please.
So moved.
So moved. So we have a motion to table this from Councilman Henderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Councilman Holland has seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye. Do we also want to table the second one?
No, sir.
You want to go ahead and go through donating some labor and equipment?
Since she fell out.
Yeah.
Good evening, how are you guys?
Good evening.
As council was aware, you guys approved in February of 2020 the master plan for the Oyster House Park. And we are currently working with Landscape Architectural Services and our project partner, the Chesapeake Conservancy, to move into that first phase, Phase 1 as we're calling it, putting the construction documents together. And basically what Phase 1 consists of is the Riverwalk extension, the underground electric service, the replacement of the bulkhead, the gangway, the pier. You can see the photo on the screen. That has an estimated probable cost for construction of around $1.2 million, almost 1.3. And in that is the electric cost, and we've worked with the director of electric, and what we would like for the council to consider is a donation of the labor and equipment costs. So all in, the cost to bury the electric service is around $99,930, it's an estimate. So what we're recommending is a waiver of the labor cost, which was roughly around $21,893, and then the equipment cost around $8,440. So a total of $30,333.04.
Okay, just to remind council that there's two things here, that doing this part of the Oyster House project will help the Chesapeake Conservancy go out and raise additional funds, so this was critical why this is coming forth. And a second part to that is when they do go out to raise funds, those people who donate to these kinds of things are trying to look to see what the local partners, what the city themselves are putting in themselves into these projects, so it's important to show our financial commitment to make this project happen. I just wanted to remind everybody. Okay, are there any questions in reference to this donation of labor and equipment? Yes, sir, Councilman King.
Yeah, so just to kind of loop back to what you brought up. So what happens if they don't raise the resources that are needed? Is this something that we would still move forward with, or would this be put on hold, or what does that look like?
You know, so right now, they have funding. They have so much funding to cover this initial part from the state, from the county, from other donations that they've already got. They need a lot more. So they want something to present. They have the money to cover this. So this will benefit our community. But at one point, it's a leap of faith that you have confidence in the Conservancy and their connections to make this project happen, but this is a critical part.
And we're hopeful when New Business 11 comes back to you at the next council meeting, they'll be able to lay out their
good.
funding plan, and so you'll be able to have a better, clear-cut
Yeah,
picture.
because I knew it was a large amount of money. I'm
Right,
just kind of curious on where they
Yep,
were, where
yep,
they
and
were
that's
at.
what we've asked them for, is to provide a clear-cut, where are you, where do we have a shortfall, that sort of thing.
No, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the part we tabled above, so. Okay, any other questions on the donation of labor and equipment? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the recommendation of staff and donate labor and equipment costs for electrical infrastructure modifications and installations for the Phase 1 Oyster House Park project along the Nanticoke River in the estimated amount of $30,333.04 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Do we have a second?
Councilman Santos, I'll second it.
Councilman Santos seconds. Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's
Thank you.
exciting. All right, any old business, City Manager?
No, sir, we do not have any old
Okay,
business.
reminder of meetings.
Okay, the only thing that we have, as the Director of Public Works talked about this week, is cleanup week. So his men and women are out there working very hard. There is a lot of stuff out there this week, so I know the residents really appreciate it. That's all that I have, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Burley, for you and your team and all the city workers and office workers and everybody who serves their time going out there. It is greatly appreciated. All right, this is kind of a strange night for liaison reports. Everybody's sticking with their old departments. We'll transition next week. So Councilman Santos gets a break, and we'll go with Councilman Henderson with Police and Fire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lengthy report. I'm just going to hit some highlights. I did receive a report from President Matt Reed of the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department. He explained the addition of 2 EMS positions that you may recall. One position filled a vacancy. The other position was added to handle increased call load and to prevent scratches. You might recall that a scratch is when our forces cannot respond to a call and they have to call an outside company, Blades, Laurel, Bridgeville, or a neighboring company to cover our call. So they're taking measures to prevent those. To better handle the increased load during the 1800 to 0 hours of the day, there is a proposal to add an additional crew for coverage during that time period. Now, that's not approved yet, it's a proposal, but if it goes forward, they'll have an additional ambulance crew on duty during those hours to cover those increased calls. There is still a less than desirable return rate for calls, so this is a concern. The return rate is the amount we actually get paid for when we go make a call. When the EMS goes out or the ambulance runs goes out, we don't get 100% of that money back. Some of it doesn't come back to us. So they're trying to get a better return rate, and they're actively working on that. Additionally, Medicare and other insurance allowances are not keeping pace with personnel costs, so this continues to be a challenge for the department. But they're being imaginative and being creative about trying to fill those gaps. The Chief Wilson reports alarms to date as of yesterday, fire and rescue of 293 and EMS 1,382 year to date. Of note, in the fire department, we had EMS has covered a total of 38 COVID calls transported by the department, 38. So. Training will resume on June 17th, live training, and live business meetings will resume on June 24th. They've been doing a lot of meetings on Zoom and some web meetings, but they've got it nailed down how to do it with proper social distancing and PPE and the like. The department recently relocated its high band repeater from the Seaford Center Tower to the Station 87 Tower. So you may see some new equipment on top of the tower at the firehouse. Sussex County government ran new antennas and new wires to the control unit, and as of yesterday, they were supposed to have the project completed. There's a monthly summary that's been presented by Second Assistant Chief Tom LeCates. You'll see data of the time of day and the days of the week that there were fires, and on the next page you'll see the distribution of those alarms, and moving on, you'll see the police report, which will have a summary of all the instances or incidents. There's an 89.4% clearance rate. You might have seen where in the last period it was down a little bit. It's starting to recover since they're starting to clear out some of those theft from automobiles that recently plagued the city. Move on. Don't have many wet fingers. All right. I'll move on. Of note, in training under the police department, there was on June 1st we had 2 Seaford Police Department recruit officers that are now attending Delaware State Police Training Academy on site. So during the heat of the pandemic, they were training online, and they were actually at the police station doing some work. However, they're back at the training academy. And of note, I will note that the Seaford Police Department continues to support volunteerism by assisting the Nanticoke Senior Center with meal deliveries to our homebound community members on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And the chief submitted a spreadsheet to me of all the not man hours, because there's women working it too. But there's a lot of hours and a lot of force brought to bear. The numbers are really, really impressive. I really appreciate the department's participation in that. Finally, on a personal note, I'd like to give special thanks to the following departments and agencies that helped to ensure a smooth and peaceful march on May 31st, 2020 for United We Stand, Divided We Fail. By my best count, we had somewhere between 75 and 80 individuals involved from public safety, which included personnel from the Seaford Police Department, the Seaford Volunteer Fire Company, Sussex County Paramedics, the Blades Police Department, the Delaware State Police, DelDOT, the statewide unmanned aerial vehicle team, which included people from the Ocean View Police Department, DelDOT, DEMA, the Delaware State Fire School. We had our own public works personnel involved, and by my count, it was over 75 individuals who contributed to that. And these assets were brought to bear within 48 hours' notice. And we owe our departments and our partner agencies a debt of gratitude for their preparedness, coordination, and cooperation in the assurance of public safety and the safety of the participants, of which I was one. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Again, you got to commend our chief for pulling that together so quickly and bringing everybody together. It was a great event. All right, next, Administration IT, Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. He attended several calls with the mayor and governor regarding COVID-19 to keep the community updated. And he also attended another conference call regarding the upcoming Employees Awards ceremony. And all the work is routine. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Wastewater and Public Works, Councilman McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few highlights. You guys have hit on a few of them so far. As we all know, Cleanup Week did start yesterday. Big highlight. They have continued to reinstall the rebuilt pump at the Mears lift station, and work has been ongoing for the Sussex County Unified Sewer District project. In regards to the wastewater treatment facility and compost, plant performance is good. There remains a compost to sell by appointment. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, in regards to Public Works, they plan to catch up on some projects once the cleanup week is behind them, replace some fire hydrants, and over the course of the next 2 weeks in wastewater treatment facility and compost, they will keep the plant up and running with no violations, perform maintenance as needed, and screen for compost. And one quick comment, unrelated to the report. I'm sad to see Mr. Councilman Mulvaney leave us. At the same time, I'm excited to see what Councilman Santos is going to bring to the table. So I will say Bill was always there for a newer councilperson when I had a question, or always there to answer and provide some advice. So going to miss the guy. So.
Yeah. And we'll be here for Jose. If it makes you feel better, Councilman McCoy, Councilman Mulvaney has sent me a text message. He's home enjoying some cookies and strawberries and already started his retirement. So he may be watching, eating, having some time. So, okay. Finally, we have Councilman King with Parks and Rec and Code.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report's been submitted in its entirety. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. Mr. Bailey has reported that the code department has issued 158 permits, which is really exciting, considering all the things that are happening. Still a lot of activity going on in our community. Some of the large project statuses: Wawa, the water and sewer is installed. Our Lady of Lourdes Church, they finished and they're ready for the final inspection. Melanie Ridge is the curbing and road work is finished and they're waiting for DelDOT entrance installation. And Muirfields 2, the first duplex is almost finished, and the second permit application is in for review. Jumping over to the Parks and Recreation Department, Katie Hickey reports out that they're continuing to work on Gateway Fountain. They met with Steve Cannon regarding the leaks. They repainted the basketball backboards and rims, and they were installed back at Nutter Park on June 1st. Katie and her team has reached out to Milford Park and Rec in Wacomico County on adult sports for Phase 1 opening to formulate a plan of action for our city. The playgrounds have been reopened. The swing sets and basketball courts to the public, as everyone knows, on June 1st. She's contacted all of the flag football coaches about hosting a meeting for the upcoming season to determine a plan going for a clinic if games are not permitted. She reached out to the state to get some rules and regulations for hosting a softball league and tournaments. She also hosted a Zoom meeting for the field hockey. So they had some problems with a lot of the irrigation systems throughout the city. They had problems at the sports complex, City Hall, and the police station. And with that, I just wanted to take a few minutes also tonight and just thank Mike Bailey and Katie Hickey, as well as all their employees in the code department and the park and rec department. It has been a true honor serving as a liaison for those two departments for the last 2 years. Living in Seaford all my life, I never realized the amount of work that goes into the day-to-day operations of our city. They do an enormous amount of work with a very small workforce. Once again, hats off for providing valuable services to our city residents, and thanks again for all that they do.
All right, thank you. Again, I want to commend all our employees, really Charles's leadership in, this has been an unusual 3 months of COVID to an election and under unusual times to trying to get a budget done to civil unrest and now restarting of an economy has been new territory for everybody. So I appreciate your leadership in keeping everything moving forward. I do want to welcome Jose to the team, and just remember you're in a seat that all of us have been in. And so we're here to help and get you up to speed as fast as possible. So glad you're aboard. So with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you. Good night.